Hello and welcome to the Building Our World podcast with me, Alex Bloisey. As always, I want to uncover the human stories behind human innovation, and this week's episode is no different. I had the pleasure of being joined by Trinh Le-Fiedler, who is the CEO and co-founder of Nomitri, which is a deep tech AI startup based in Berlin. Now, I was super keen to get Trinh on the show because if you look at her profile and her background, she really has done it all. Harvard Law, consulting, and worked her way up to C-level in the corporate world. So I really wanted to know why she then made the jump to start a tech company. And what I found out was pretty remarkable. Her background, her family story was something I definitely wasn't expecting. And I will let her explain it in her own words during the episode. It really was fascinating. But on top of that, she really gives a great insight into the first 2 years as a founder, how it compares to the corporate world, not just in work, but in life, personally, emotionally. And then she gives some great pointers, of course, to any aspiring founders out there. It was a really good chat, and it was amazing to get some insights from someone who is clearly an incredibly smart person. So I really hope you enjoy this one and you get some great value from it. And without further ado, we will get this one started. Let's take it back to the beginning, essentially why you made that jump into that founder and CEO role. Because from what I can see and from what I've heard, that you were practicing law, then worked your way up at some sort of massive tech companies. So what has kind of led to you making that jump back in 2019?
Yeah. Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me. That is a very good question. And I think particularly now that I'm currently going through the hardest phase in my point of having a founder, which is running around a financing round, which is really tough right now. I constantly also question myself, like, why I'm doing this to myself, this is really exhausting. And you're working long nights, long weekends. And it's good to be reminded why I did it and decided to do it from the beginning on. And to be frankly with you, I had a very good and I guess accomplished career behind me. I started out my career as a Wall Street lawyer after finishing my master at Harvard. I went and worked in New York and London, and then I switched to management consulting with a very good company, Boston Consulting Group, and then I was also a director at Wayfair. So all of that, really great things. But I think the thing that really tipped, the scale for me in deciding, now is the time for me to really do my own thing was really I guess, I'm an Asian person growing up and always being told, okay, you have to perform, you have to be the top, you have to climb up the corporate ladder. But it was never really, the time for me to okay, now I have accomplished all of that and I have proved that I can do it. Now I really want to go off and do some really risky, but also really funny thing. And I think that's what really gave me, the final kick. Okay, forget about that. Don't take yourself out a little bit of this red pack because you've been there. Do something of your own. Do your risky thing. Do something that is where the path is not so laid out for you and not so obvious, because that's really is, might be more fun, might be more interesting, might be a much higher learning curve. And so I decided to do it. Yeah.
Fantastic. I can't remember. I watched something or I read something about. It's interesting what you say about the sort of Asian culture.
Yeah.
And they had a real problem with people starting companies, and the entrepreneurial culture just isn't really there. It's all about like the corporate ladder. And I know you spent some time did you go study sort of on site, I'm guessing, at Harvard?
Yeah, I went to Boston, and then I worked in New York and London. Yeah, so I spent a couple of years working abroad. I was also doing a project for a long time in China. And I mean, I'm not saying that Asia in general are really, not good for entrepreneurs. We have one of the most amazing companies being set up. But I think just traditionally, when you grow up in Asian culture, Asian parents normally just tell you, okay, you have to become a doctor or lawyer because that's really high reward and really high income, right? And less of a risky kind of thing. And then there's like, and I think that's, at least my world was like, okay, you have to go to Harvard and then become a lawyer, and that's really a good thing. And then after that, you all set. And I've done that, and I think it was good for me to see that I have the power and the skills to do it. But I think once I accomplished that, I just felt like, okay, now I really wanted to do something, leaving a little bit like the comfort zone. And I think maybe I'm a general person who always love to go and leave my comfort zone. So I think that was the decision to me, like, okay, let's go out and do like something fun, something more risky, something more unpredictable, but also with a huge potential of learning, of gaining what is. And I think, honestly, I think I also was able to do that because I have 2 daughters, and I really wanted to show them, hey, you can also go out there as a woman and then just, found a deep tech company. And just engage and hire really good people and just, work with them.
Yeah, that is such a great turn for you to do. Because if you look at like your LinkedIn profile, for example, like that's like a CV's like a dream, like law, Harvard, consulting, C-level stuff, director, like it's.
Yeah, that's true, Alex. But it looks like that, like, but it also is a burden, because sometimes, and I mean, let's honest here. I mean, there's always a light and shadow as a founder's life. And there are times when I was like, okay, why did I ever leave that? Or the guys who were with me and started with me a career at BCG, they are now like partners and I'm not, right? So have I done the right decision or whatsoever? So it's also put a lot of pressure on you. But I think it really takes strength and sometimes kind of like liberation internally to say, okay, that's fine. It could be that path. I decided not to follow that path because I felt it was not interestingly enough for me. I wanted something more exciting. And so I chose a path that is a little bit less predictable, but also higher risk. But yeah, sometimes this kind of CV also haunts you because everybody's like, why the hell did you leave all that and, just found your own company?
What was it like when you made that jump and made that decision from like friends, family or colleagues? Was there, because I'm guessing in that world, it's quite a rare thing to do. Did you get much kickback?
No, not really. I mean, even my parents, I was most afraid telling my parents because, Asian parents, Mom, I'm going to leave my Harvard degree and just go and found my own company and starting almost from zero. But my mom, she is very entrepreneurial, like after the Vietnam War, we lost everything. My parents really lost everything, all the lands that they have, etc. And while my father was, being put in prison after the war as a war prisoner, my mom really whooped up like the whole family and her sister's siblings' families by just building up a whole business by herself. So when I told her that, Mom, I want to also start my own business, I was scared that she would be like totally mad at me, but she was like, yeah, you should try it, see how far you get. And it's really cool. And I think that really helped me a lot because my mom did the same thing. And somehow she was really lucky and also I think really talented. And so she built out of nothing after the war a very good business that really, kind of like put food on the table for all of us. And I think that's the reason why she was super supportive, and that really gave me my emotional strength and support to say, okay, yeah, let's do it.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. So what so your father was like a prisoner of war after, would it end in like late 70s, was it?
Yeah, the war ended in 75.
Yeah.
And my father was in a prisoner's war in a prison for almost like 4 years.
So so anyone who fought in the war, did they kind of put them in the prison then? Because I thought they would have did they not just leave? Because I know it ended badly for the Americans.
No, I mean, so what happened after the war is like, so my father was of course on the Vietnamese army, and he was an officer. And so when the war was lost and the communists got to power, they put all the officers into, they call it work camps, in order to prepare people for the new way of living, a new way of thinking. But what that really was is really, it's like, a kind of like a prisoner where they can only come home and visit the family for like, once a quarter or whatsoever. So really working hard and then getting like, all this communist doctrine put into them, and really and believing that they need to be, working hard to do that. And all the while, my mom was really trying to, kind of like build something out of nothing, so just to put food on the table for all of us. And so she started buying stuff, like simple stuff in the city in Saigon, like, toothpaste and all that. And then she went down to the rural areas at the Mekong River Delta, sold that for the people because they need this kind of like stuff. And then she would buy then fruits and vegetables, and then would travel back and sell it then in the big cities. And so slowly, she kind of built this business out of that. And she was so successful after a while that she really, not only put food on the table for her own family, but also for her siblings' family. And she has like 5 siblings. So that was really something that I always admire about my parents. And when my father was released, he joined her, and together they really just like, run this business and build something really nice. And that enables us to have enough money actually then to flee the country.
Wow. Amazing. That is, if you ever want some perspective when you're having a bad day.
That's true. No, that's true. Absolutely.
I get stressed when, if a supplier pays an invoice late, or someone drops out of a row, and it's just people obviously of that generation in that part of the world. And then if I refer back to obviously, where I grew up, like my grandparents and World War II, and my dad was Italian and like came over to England. It's just like a whole generation. They just made a different stuff, aren't they, in terms of what they've had to go through. And
absolutely. But I think it's also, it's not a but. I think it gives you perspective and strength, because you just see how great a human's mind and soul can achieve, and how much you can get yourself out there. And I saw that firsthand from my family. And I think one of the best lessons that I ever got from anywhere, but also from my parents, is like, they said, you can lose everything, it's just like on the tip of things, where just like, you can lose your house, your land, even your social status by just a war, or by like, the flooding or whatsoever. But my father always said, as long as you have something in your head and in your heart, you can always build it from scratch again. And I think that's really is really how you say it, encouraging, because you just feel like you can do it, and you just really have to believe in it.
And I'm guessing you've taken that throughout your whole career, even at your law and your consulting, and now, and we'll come on to it as well, with your journey with Nomitri. So, wow, fascinating backstory. I mean, I was not expecting that.
No worries. But I mean, just to be honest with you, I mean, of course, talking about it just gives me like this big perspective, but I'll be very honest, on my day-to-day life, I'm also freak out about things, when it's about, whether it's like, the hire that we didn't get, or like, struggles with investor discussions or whatsoever. And it's hard sometimes to remind yourself, hey, put this into perspective, but it's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's all relative, isn't it? Even if you were super comfortable, you'd always have something to worry about. So if we fast forward then to 2019, and when Nomitri was founded, so you were high up in another company. We talked about your consulting background, your law stuff as well. How on earth did you make that, just in terms of, I know sort of why you made the jump, but Nomitri is like a deep tech, deep learning visual AI company. So how on earth did that all happen?
Yeah, so I was lucky. First of all, before I make that jump, I was the CFO and head of business for another AI deep tech startup. So I helped them getting a bridge finance. And so while doing that, I already managed to get a good picture of what startup means, and also be able to build up a network of investors. And I think most importantly is that I just saw this big potential of where technology could go. So that's the first thing that I'm lucky with. And then the second thing is that I also I'm married to a very highly talented deep learning engineer who also loves to start his own company. He always was eager to start a company with me, but I was always like, no, forget about it. We're never going to do that together because there's too many risks, right? I don't want to mix things. And then he also got a very good, talented friend, Moritz, who's our third founder, who's super accomplished in terms of academia, in terms of this new exciting technology. So at some point when I was then working for this other company, I was like, hey, I could either put a lot of hours and blood, sweat, and tears into this company of somebody else, or I just build my own company. And then it also happened that Max came back from a conference, told me some about Amazon Go, and then we just talk. And then while we are talking about it, I was like, hey, there's this amazing technology and mission that we can go out and do it together. So yeah, why don't we do it? So I think it was like when I really had this clear product vision and vision where the problem that I could solve, that's what gave me like the final drive and energy to say, yeah, let's go out and do it. So I was never afraid about doing it in deep tech because I have two really amazing founders who are accomplished and experienced in that already. But I think in general, I'm not a person who loves to go out of her comfort zone. So I'm not kind of like scared of doing something that I don't have any of, because I think the majority of part of my life is always like, self-learning. When I want to learn something like photography, I just buy a couple of books, read it, talk with people, try it out, and then get on my way. So that's how it started.
And if you could just sum up for people listening, I mean, what is your founder and the company's mission? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah. So what we do at Nomitri is that we are really creating cutting edge embedded visual deep learning AI. And we have created a software stack, actually a software platform that really enables any kind of cameras to become intelligent on device. So we really have managed to create like super highly compressed deep learning neural networks that can see things, that can track object whatsoever, and make them really small. Because normally when you talk about deep learning neural networks, they are several gigabytes big. You put them on a cloud. You have to have a stable network so that you can do the magic. We thought it must be easier, especially when you're talking about visual AI, to do it on device, because then you don't have all this mess about, streaming video data of your face, your body, whatsoever to a cloud, and therefore making it hackable. So we wanted to create neural network that are so small that they can fit into and downloadable on a smartphone or on a simple cameras, and therefore not only being super privacy preserving, but also energy sufficient. You can use it remote, you can use it offline. And you can use it in different kind of like variations, either as a camera in a smartphone, but also as a camera on a drones or whatsoever. And our first vertical where we really use this techno stack that we have built is in the retail space. Because with that kind of like technology platform that we created two things. One, we call it an embedded intelligence shopping assistant. Basically, we created a software in an app that is downloadable on a smartphone and that allows people to walk through the supermarket, and this camera on the smartphone acts like a virtual cashier. So the cashier sees what you put into the cart, or whether you take it out of the cart, and then whether you do something wrong or not, and then remind you of that. And at the end, it allows you then also to pay directly on the smartphone, and then you walk out. You don't need to go to a cash anymore. We also have created with that not an embedded smart card, meaning intelligent camera, a simple camera with a system or module that also do the same thing. So it's an intelligent camera. You can clip it on an existing card in a supermarket, and it also sees what you're putting in, what you're taking out, and at the end also allows you to, pay directly on your smartphone.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of that, obviously, with Amazon Go. Are you working would that be working like within the Amazon ecosystem, or would that be sort of separate to it almost?
No, it would be different. It's an alternative because Amazon Go is cloud-based and visual AI. So they're really so what is really different with Amazon Go is that, first of all, they're installing tons of cameras on the ceilings and sensors in the shelves in order to triangulate what you are doing and what you're doing. And all the while, sending this video stream from the cameras to this cloud in order to analyze it. We just really cut it very short and lean by just saying, okay, the AI is directly on the smartphone. So that does the trick. You don't need to have a constant kind of like stream up of the data to any kind of cloud, because the AI of us sits in the smartphone itself, and therefore also your video data never gets streamed somewhere. So nobody can really hack that. And also our the beauty of our solution, since it's always embedded and on device, the retailers can piggyback on the smartphones, right? And so he doesn't have to invest a lot of money into own cameras, because the cameras the shoppers bring with them. And so it's really low price, and it's also super easy to install.
Okay, but this is like quite complex, obviously, technology. And
yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It's fascinating, and there's definitely a market for it. But with technology, obviously, it requires money. So, how, when starting this business, obviously you have investors and things like that, but in practice, how does that look? You have an idea, but you need money to obviously build the platform. So, what's like the way you went about that?
Yeah. So very, very concretely, first of all, you have to put some money yourself on the table to found a company. And we also gave it a little bit of a shareholder's credit to get things started. And then it's really about us putting together a story and a vision, what we want to achieve. And, gather a team that we believe can do that around us. And then we started going out and just asking people like, is it something that you believe in? Do you want to, get on board with us as an investor or as a team member? And we were lucky that we really have met this investor. I mean, we talked with a lot of investors, but there was this one investor whose name I cannot say because he doesn't want it to, but when he saw our deck, he was like, yes, I totally believe that. I totally believe that you have this unique USP because you do everything on embedded. So that's this much higher, low price. And it's also super simple. But then he totally understands it because he comes from the retail space. So he knows what the problems are that they are fighting at, right? And so he's totally said, okay, this is the problem and I totally see it and your solution will solve it. But at the same time, he was not a techie. So he really sent us to an interview with, I think the current head of AI of Lenovo, as well as the former director of the German Society for Artificial Intelligence. And they really grilled us whether we really have the competencies technically also to solve that problem. Because what we are trying to do, or what we have achieved in the last 2 years, is really amazing. Because right now, there's not that many companies out there that manage to build applications that consist and combine 5 and more highly compressed neural network at the same time. Just to give you some reference, like all of our neural networks are smaller than 1 megabyte, right? And I think the smallest one is even 150 kilobytes. So it's like nothing compared to the several gigabytes that you have. At the same time, it's so high performant that it can analyze and observe like more than 30 frames per second. I think the fastest one is 50 frames per second. So that allows you to really understand pictures and video streams in a real time. So you can behave like a normal person and it sees everything. So that's the kind of like performance that we managed to create.
So you coming back to like your journey as a founder over, what has it been, like 2 years now?
2 years.
Just over 2 years, yeah. I mean, how much? Obviously, you've built this, amazing product. You found a niche. You've got a USP. You've got sort of money to get behind it. It can seem fairly sort of straightforward in a way, but how has it sort of changed your life? Would you say, in terms of like the stresses and the workload, and how has it basically gone in terms of? Do you think it's harder than what you thought it was, or easier?
Yeah, good question. I would think, in all honesty, I would say mentally it's much harder than any job I had before. But physically, it's maybe the easiest one that I ever had in my life. When I was a Wall Street lawyer working for private equity firms like KKR and Blackstone, my days were really like long hours. You just work your days, and when you have a deal, it's like 24 hours. You don't sleep. I used to have an inflatable mattress in my office, and it was really, kind of like exhausting. But it was never the kind of like mentally exhausting in a way that you feel responsible and you feel there's something that I really, really want to achieve, and that's really is dear to me, And when you see it endangers, and there's always days that are bad, when you get a no, when people, when people decide to leave, go back to India, when you really rely on them to stay on, that kind of things. It's physically it's not nothing, but it's mentally, emotionally, it's like, oh my God, is not everything in danger? So when you have something that's so dear to you, it's really things getting much more, how to say, intense, right? So it's the joy is really intense, but also the worries is really intense. Whereas when I was working as a consultant or whatever, my days were really long and exhausting, but it was never this kind of like heartbreak, excitement, but also this heartbreak worries that you have to deal with. And I think it definitely has changed. Yeah.
Have the highs and lows started to level out a bit more compared to the start, or do you feel? I know it's probably different because you obviously have to get funding all the time. It's not just sort of one lot. So do you feel like it has leveled out, or is it still quite intense in terms of that high and low?
Well, I think founding a company and then founding it during a global pandemic is also another level. So in a way, I think I really went in all there. I constantly learn, to be honest with you. I'm not saying that I'm doing it better now, but I think that I really, with every day, with every financing round, with every investor discussion, with every hiring, and with every, loss of a key employee, you learn, it hurts, you worry, then you do things, you just stand up, brush the dust off, and then you just say, okay, now let's put a post on LinkedIn, or now let's just try another one, and let's do another pitch. And I think it's not easy. I don't think that I will ever be super easy or ever be like leaving everything out, but I think that I can see now things more in perspective. And I also have managed to build a support system around me, which I didn't have in the beginning. And I think that's just a very normal course of thing, but you need to do that. You need to really kind of like get friends who have the same experiences, so you can call them up when you are feeling bad, or they call you up when they're feeling bad. You just need to have a really good support system. And then it works. And then I'm not saying it's getting easier, because I guess, the bigger you are, you also have always different kind of problem. I guess in the beginning is about, first funding, later it's going to be a scale up, and later on, I don't know what, but I think it just really is part of the journey. And it's always, I just need to learn to remind myself all the time that it's actually is a privilege and my own decision that I'm doing it. And I really should accept it.
And what would you say, like, the next sort of 2 or 3 years looks like for yourself, and and also the company, what sort of plans do you have? And do you think your role will change at all in terms of what you do now in the day-to-day? Are you going to be like more sort of hands-off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope so. I hope that, within the next 2 or 3 years, we will, now that we have really managed to, have this breakthrough technically, and we also have first traction of first tests and customers, and that it comes in, and people that comes in and see our technology as well as our product, they really, really like it, that we then can really start from, the first thing, incubating idea and proving that it works at all. Now going into, okay, great. Now we see it works. Now we see there are people wanting it. So how can we, kind of like make it, scale it fast, sell it, and then also enter into other markets. So that's really super interesting, right? So I'm hoping that we're going to get out of this first kind of like really rough and hurdle some kind of like first steps into now, okay, let's run, right? Let's run and then figure out the best technology, how we can run fastest. And I mean, up until now, I was the only, up until recently, I was like the only full-time non-tech hire in our company. All the rest are engineers. So I was dealing everything. I was just, responsible for sales, but also legal, ops, whatnot. I really love to have like now hire more people into the non-tech team, salespeople, who can take all of that. And then I would love to spend more time with my co-founders to really think strategically about which are the best market for us to attract, et cetera, as well as then having time to really work and build and formulate our culture that I have, but that we didn't really have so much time, kind of consciously to implement it, because we once, after we were founded, we were hit by the global pandemic, lockdowns, remote work, and all that. So I'd love to have some times to really get into this reality as well, and then really do a conscious decision how I can, under this new environment, just create my own culture with the team.
I think it's so difficult when you're, I mean, I found this, I can only speak from my point of view, but when you're constantly in like the day-to-day, like the nitty-gritty, it's so hard to zoom out and see the bigger picture and see other aspects of the business that you should be spending time on.
Absolutely. And then absolutely. And then also get out of this original role where you feel like, okay, since we are so small, you as the founder should be the first one in the office and be the last one to leave, because you need to be a role model, and there's so much thing to do. To transferring into or transitioning into a role where I just feel like I'm going to take this day off and just really think and read and listen, so that I have enough perspective to get us to, this direction or that direction, that is really, I think, difficult.
You got to take your vacations. It's so important. So it's so important. But if you will finish soon, appreciate you're busy. So one thing I wanted to ask is if there is maybe it's a software engineer or someone in non-tech who wants to make that jump to start a company, to make an impact, to fulfill a mission that they've always had. What's sort of couple of bits of advice would you give them, knowing what you know now?
So I think it doesn't really apply to everybody, but I think it's, for me, it helped that I had done myself a couple of jobs that gave me a little bit of confirmation that I really am able to be to win in a kind of a competitive kind of environment, so that I can tick that off. But it's just me, right? But the second thing that was this corporate jobs also gave me was some kind of like basic financial security, not like a huge amount of money, but you don't have to worry about, simple things. I think that's also was helpful for me. So, but I mean, you can also start out of graduate school if you want to. I think it's just for me, I think particularly since I have kids, it was really good for me just to know, okay, everything is set. Now this is like an adventure, but like if everything fails, we're not going to be like, super, super worse off. So is also helpful. And then the third thing is just really like, just do it. Because I think, once you see that you really are excited about it. And I think this is the best of times to found, because due to, kind of venture capital, there's not this huge financial risk that you have to do it when, as opposed to my parents, when we did it, 50 years ago, it was like, really, really risky. So yeah, definitely should do it when you feel that you want to do it.
Absolutely. I feel like there's almost, with me, I know it's a completely different thing, but it almost just like makes sense. And you have like, there's almost like epiphany to go out on your own and do it. And it makes sense to you, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to other people, but you have to be true to yourself. But thank you so much for sharing your story, your background, absolutely fascinating, and your sort of wisdom as well. I'm sure it'll be of amazing value to people out there. So thank you.
Thanks, Alex, for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Building Our World podcast. I really hope you got some great value from it and enjoyed the conversation. If you are new to the series, then I do encourage you to take a look at the back catalogue. I've got some conversations with some of the brightest and best in Berlin tech. And if you want to stay up to date with future episodes, then please do hit that subscribe button and that follow button. It really helps me try and gain some traction with this series. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. And until next time, goodbye.